The question is to Arthur, and where did your family move from, Arthur, and why?
Well, I think my father probably was in Purley. That's where I was born. And my mother was Georgian, and she came from Russia. And so my father in the First World War was in the Machine Gun Corps at Salonika. And then the British Army all went to Georgia to put down the Red Rising, and they soon decided they couldn't do that. So they fled, followed by lots of Georgian girls who wanted to be free. And so she met my father in Georgia, and then came to, when the war broke out, the Second World War, he was immediately called up to teach machine gunnery, and we were dumped in West Bay and didn't see him again. That was it. And so there was this Georgian woman having to earn a living in West Bay in the 30s, and that was hard.
What was hard about it?
Well, Thomas Hardy wrote about all the strange people that were foreigners to Dorset. Dorset was very, very rural for many, right up to the 60s. It was very rural. And Bridport News would have headlines like, Netherbury Band's Bedminster Bride. Now that was unusual, even though they're only 3 miles apart. Bedminster man married Bedminster woman.
Any other questions? Raise your hand, please.
This is a question, Rick. A question about the way that labour relations in the netting industry and the rope industry. I mean, you give quite a sort of positive view. I'm particularly interested in how people were paid in the factories. Were they paid a wage for working, however many hours a week, or were they on piece rates?
They were always paid weekly, Some things they were on piecework, and they had to work jolly hard, to get a bit of extra money or whatever. Before the war, it was not very much pay, not really, about £4 or £5 a week, possibly. So if there's piecework, well then they were goods in, Yeah.
So they were earning less than Nigel was earning at 10 years old. What was the wage? I mean, you talked about the fishing industry being very buoyant still. Has it always been a good industry to work in, Nigel, for pay?
No, not really. No, I think if you read about the people that used to fish off of Iceland, it was terrible conditions. And, they really had to put up with something for the money they got. Although they called them, they used to call them one-day millionaires because they came back from, say, a 21-day trip to Iceland. And they'd have a taxi standing by for the wife and the kids. They could go anywhere, buy sweets. And they'd have this 21 days pay to spend in about 2 or 3 days before they were out again on another 21-day trip. Very similar to the Merchant Navy. That was the same. You do a long term away from home, you'd come home and you'd have a lot of money to spend in a very short time. So you did. Simple as that.
What's happened to the mackerel? Where are the mackerel gone? All the fish
Still
gone?
about?
Well, they're about now, we heard, only this evening, we heard there's some about.
If you look, perhaps my learned friend back there, Rod, could probably tell you better than that, but there's still mackerel being caught in vast quantities. It's just that there's not so many comes into the shore here, and it's just a thing that happens, things change, you see things different. You can think back a few hundred years ago when you had blue whales and stuff running up and down the channel here, and similar things to that. Things change, things alter, but there's still as many mackerel being landed to this day as there ever has been. It's just that they're landed in a different, they're landed by purse seiners, pair trawlers and things like that. You get one, I'm sure Rod could back me up on this, there was a new boat in Scotland a little while ago, and his first shot on mackerel, he made £1 million. That was his first shot. And that's still nowadays, it's just there's big boats, fishing them out in the Western Atlantic and that sort of thing. There's still as many being landed, but you don't see them around here quite so much, not for any other reason. It's like Cornwall was devoid of sardines for years. Now there's an industry down there catching sardines again, you know. So it's just how it goes. The whole of life evolves, you know, over the years. A bit like the weather. They say, oh, we don't get the weather we used to get. You will, don't worry. And West Bay will flood again in a big way. Don't worry about that.
That's right.
That's
Do your speakers think that the Broadchurch effect has increased tourism in West Bay?
I don't know, Arthur, anybody.
Broadchurch.
We've had
Arthur.
programs like that before over the years.
That's right.
And it's a short-based phenomenon. They are really sometimes quite a pain because they will stop you getting about your ordinary daily routine. Some of them are okay, but some of them tend to take over. They tell you, you can't walk down here, you can't do this, you can't do that. But the Broadchurch effect is fine. It's just what it is, isn't it? You know, it's one of those things. I mean, I personally can't stand it. But there you go, because I can't understand a word that the guy's saying, that tenant's saying. I can't understand a word he's saying.
Tenants
If they,
saying.
I have to put subtitles on to understand what, and that's no good.
It's not
Sorry.
our dialect, is it? It's
No.
It's not our dialect, is it?
What,
You know.
what do you think, Arthur,
come-
of the Broadchurch effect?
It brings lots of people to look. I'm not sure that they don't seem to spend a very great deal, but they do love it. They love the cliffs. They never quite took up on, do you remember Reggie Perrin taking his clothes off and leaving them on the beach? That never brought many people.
That was West Bay.
But yeah, we've had, I mean, Jackie Stewart came here many years ago and demonstrated a Vauxhall Astra on the West Pier. There's been, that it would break without going over the edge. And numerous things like that, and Harbour Lights was okay for a bit, until they discovered that all the cast were terrified of the sea, and therefore they had to then finish it off in a warehouse in Bristol.
That's right.
So all these things help. They bring more people. They bring people from abroad who see them in Bulgaria or somewhere like that.
And your thoughts, Jeff? Do you have any thoughts on the Broadchurch effect? Or?
Same, really. It's only a 5-minute wonder, really, isn't it? You know, it'll quieten down, then we should be back to normal again.
See, the Broadchurch effect is not how West Bay people see it.
No.
What people want to see about West Bay is you wander around the harbour, you meet some obnoxious fishermen, of which I was one, and that's the main attraction, is to just wander around and to see what's happening. It's not to see some film company which sections off a big block and says, and you might get a glimpse of David Tennant or Olivia Colman or whatever her name is. You might get a glimpse of that. But the attraction of West Bay is to wander around and see something, say like the fishing and that sort of thing, or you know, go and sit on the beach or whatever. It's not to see a film set. Go to Pinewood to see that.
Because it's a town that isn't like Padstow or St Ives, is it? Famous people do come to West Bay and they go to Arthur's restaurant, but they're just treated as everybody else is treated.
That's right. Yeah. You know, you don't treat them any different. As I just said to you this afternoon, as Arthur said, the amount of people that I'd say call it Notting Hill on Sea, but the amount of people that celebrities and so on and so forth that actually come here is phenomenal, and you'll see them in the supermarkets walking around the bay and all that, but they do it because they don't want to be recognised. They haven't got the paparazzi chasing them about and all this. They just meet up, like you say, with some idiot like me and talk about rubbish, you know, and that's what they want to do.
But Arthur, the mistake that some of the celebs or pop stars make is that they turn up in really flashy cars, don't they, with blacked out windows. Tell me about...
Yeah, we had rather, all those years ago, when Jade Jagger was going to be a country girl earning her own living. She had a cottage in Ford Abbey somewhere, and I think it was her 18th or 21st birthday. And she said she'd booked for Mick and Dad and brother to come and have a meal at the riverside. And she said, "You've got to promise me you won't tell anybody that we're coming. Otherwise, life will become difficult." So we didn't tell anybody, and they all turned up. And then suddenly, all sorts of people started trying to get in and jump up and look in the windows. And she came and said, "Look, you betrayed me, haven't you? You've told people we were coming." I said, "No, I haven't." She said, "Why are all these people here?" I said, "Well, look at the end of the bridge." So she said, "What's that?" I said, "There's a big blacked out blue Mercedes with a chauffeur." And no one in West Bay's ever seen a car like that before.
So they knew somebody special inside. Anybody else got any questions for the three chaps?
It's a history question, really. Did any of the small boats from West Bay join the flotilla which went out to Dunkirk to rescue the army?
No,
I don't think
some
so,
did
no.
from Weymouth, but none from West Bay. But
Don't think so.
My father was on a minesweeper called the Grey Mist, which was a whole Bridport crew. And although he was not at Dunkirk, he was at Cherbourg. So there was a load of Bridport people, Snowy White, Harold Smith, I could name on and name on and name on. And they were there. But Weymouth they did go from, but West Bay, I don't think there was anything. Well, probably by the time they got there, it would be time to come back. Like, you know, there weren't any big enough boats capable to do that.
No.
There is now, but there wasn't then. So nobody did.
No.
Not as far as I've been told, you know, by all the different.
There was an inshore minesweeper squadron, about 3 boats were based in West Bay, which used to go out daily and make sure that people hadn't dropped mines and things like that. And I've got a photograph at home of my sister and I lying on the beach with these 3 little blobs in the background. So there was an activity, but nothing was big enough to even get around Portland Bill, let alone all the way up to the Kent coast.
Any other questions? Raise your hand if you would like to ask a question. No? Well, thank you, Jeff. Thank you,
Right.
Nigel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, up in the gods. Shout, shout.
My cousin came to Burton Bradstock in the early 60s, and he said they used to have lorries come down, and whatever they dumped into the sea, dolphins used to come and attack it. Was that your leftover fish or leftover meat?
No.
Lorries used to dump stuff in the sea.
Yeah, he used to come down
When was that?
in the early 60s.
Early 60s.
Yeah, 1962, 63. And I'll tell you what it was. It was snow. That was when we had the bad winter. And they hauled the snow down and they dumped it off of the West Pier.
That's right.
From
and into the harbour. Yeah.
And from Beaminster and all round.
Yeah.
That's what that was. That was lorries that were hauling snow.
Right.
That might sound strange to anybody that doesn't realise, but Bridport in that period was cut off, I think, for 6 or 7 weeks, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And the
63.
snowdrifts were like 10, 12, 15 foot high.
Yeah.
And that was what that was. That was
Yeah.
snow.
Yeah.
And actually what that done, it done a really peculiar phenomenon. Where they dumped it in the water on west side there used to be very good grounds for catching prawns. And that, when they dumped that killed that area for several years.
Yeah.
Until they restocked from elsewhere because of this snow.
That's right.
And that was what that was. So if that answers your question.
Any more for any more?
Contractors did very well with that.
Yeah, they did.
Because they had loads and loads of snow, wagons loaded with snow,
The snow was still piled up Dorchester Road in June and July of that year.
Yeah.
That's how bad it was.
63, that was, yeah.
1962,
Yeah.
63.
Yeah.
We used to come down over the cliff. My mate who's gone down. We used to come down over the cliff, the East Cliff, on sledges, and there was no railings across, and you'd go right out across the beach as far as the pier. On set. And the harbour master, who later, Eric, he broke his nose because he went down like they do with the luges, where they lay down on him, and he hit the bottom, smacked his nose, and broke his nose.
Trevor, note to Trevor, we need to seek out some archive film of 1962 and 63 snow.
Preferably
in
with broken
Dorset.
noses, yes.
Yes.
Although nothing to do with what we've been talking about, it's to do with this room we're in tonight. There isn't a young Bridport boy that didn't sit in the back row here watching wonderful films and having their first cuddle in a cinema. And it was the most magical, wonderful cinema you could ever imagine. And we'd see things like Old Mother Riley and the Three Stooges and San Demetrio, London. And it was the only place you could ever get close to a girl.
And you still can, Arthur. You still can.
Well, down here, it was 1 and 3s, wasn't it? Then it went back 1 and 9 and 2 and 3 up the back. If you was lucky enough with a young lady, you could sit at the back, you see, for 2 and 3pence.
And the one in Lyme Regis had double seats where two could sit in one.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Steamy stuff, Arthur.
I think the lyric had double seats as well, actually.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
Yeah.
Yes, the lyric is.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today and adding to our archive of film. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.